My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 46 years old, and the last thing I expected to find on my front porch after 9 years of silence was my daughter holding a folder labeled Family Expectations. She didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She didn't even ask how I'd been. Instead, she held the folder out like a lawyer serving legal papers. "These are the things that need to happen now," she said. I stared at her, unable to speak. Behind me, I could hear Hannah humming softly in the kitchen while she finished preparing dinner, completely unaware that the daughter who had vanished from my life almost a decade earlier had suddenly appeared at our front door. Emily looked past me into the house, then back into my eyes. "Grandpa and Grandma have thought this through," she continued. "This is what's fair." Fair? That word landed harder than anything else she could have said. She opened the folder before I could even touch it. "Hannah should transfer part of her company's shares into a family trust," Emily said matter-of-factly. "You need to update your will. Grandpa and Grandma deserve financial support after everything they've been through, and I deserve compensation for everything Hannah took from me." I honestly wondered if I'd heard her correctly. Not because the demands were outrageous, because she spoke as if they were completely reasonable, as if everyone in the world would naturally agree. For several seconds, I couldn't find a single word. The young woman standing in front of me wasn't acting like someone reconnecting with her father. She was negotiating an inheritance that wasn't hers. 9 years, 9 birthdays, 9 Christmases, 9 Thanksgivings. Not one phone call, not one letter, not one text asking whether I was still alive. Then the company my wife built went public. Overnight, newspapers reported Hannah's net worth at $44 million. And suddenly, my daughter knew exactly where I lived. Hannah stepped quietly into the hallway, drying her hands with a kitchen towel. The smile she'd been wearing disappeared the instant she saw Emily's expression. Neither woman spoke. Emily never even looked at her. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on me. "You owe this family," she said. I searched her face, looking for even a trace of the little girl I remembered. Instead, I saw certainty. Absolute certainty. She truly believed she'd been robbed. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. "Emily." My voice barely came out above a whisper. "Who told you this was ever your money?" She didn't hesitate. She answered so quickly it was obvious. She'd repeated those words many times before. "Grandpa said you'd understand." In that instant, I realized something that chilled me far more than the list she was holding. This visit hadn't started today. It had started years ago, long before my daughter ever knocked on my door. The moment Emily said, "Grandpa said you'd understand," my mind went back to the beginning. Not to the day I met Hannah. To the day I lost my wife. Everything that happened afterward only makes sense if you understand those months. When Laura died, the world didn't stop. Mine did. For everyone else, life kept moving. Bills still arrived. People still drove to work. Neighbors still mowed their lawns. I barely remembered to eat. Some mornings I'd wake up convinced I'd heard Laura calling my name. Then I'd remember she was gone, and I'd spend another day wondering how I was supposed to keep breathing without her. Emily was 16 then. She was grieving too, but unlike me, she still had somewhere to run. My parents practically moved her into their house. "We'll help her through this," my mother told me. At the time, I was grateful. I didn't realize I was slowly losing my daughter. Hannah entered our lives as Laura's hospice nurse during her final weeks. She wasn't loud. She wasn't overly cheerful. She never tried to force hope where there wasn't any. She simply treated Laura with incredible dignity. She spoke to Laura instead of around her. She remembered the little things Laura liked. She made sure Laura always looked comfortable before family visited. Most importantly, she reminded me that caring for Laura didn't mean forgetting to care for myself. "Mr. Mercer," she'd say gently, "you need to eat something." "I'm not hungry." "I know." She'd place a sandwich beside me anyway. "Eat half." Sometimes I did. Sometimes I didn't. She never judged me. After Laura passed away, Hannah disappeared from our lives. She never called, never texted, never lingered. That chapter had ended. For nearly a year, I focused on surviving. Grief counseling, work, trying to be available whenever Emily wanted to see me. The problem was, Emily rarely wanted to. Every invitation seemed to go through my parents first. "Dad, I'm busy." "Dad, Grandma already made plans." "Dad, maybe next weekend." I believed her. Looking back, I wonder how many of those conversations were truly hers. Nearly 18 months after Laura's funeral, my grief counselor encouraged everyone in our support group to attend a charity dinner benefiting families receiving hospice care. I almost didn't go. Then someone called my name. "Daniel." I turned. "Hannah." She smiled politely. "I didn't know you'd be here." I almost wasn't. She laughed softly. I said the same thing. There was nothing romantic about that conversation. No sparks. No dramatic moment. Just two people whose lives had been permanently changed by the same heartbreaking experience. We talked for 20 minutes. Mostly about Laura. She remembered details even I had forgotten. Not because she was trying to impress me. Because she genuinely cared. When the evening ended, she said something that stayed with me. "I'm glad you came tonight." "So am I." That was all. Months passed before we saw each other again. This time it was at another grief support event. Then a volunteer fundraiser. Eventually, we began having coffee after meetings. Neither of us rushed anything. Sometimes we'd spend an hour talking about loss. Other times we'd simply sit in silence. For the first time since Laura died, silence didn't feel unbearable. One afternoon, Hannah looked at me across the table. "You smiled today." I hadn't noticed. I guess I did. Laura would have wanted that. Those words mattered. Because Hannah never acted like she was competing with my late wife. She honored her memory every chance she got. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with her. Even after realizing how I felt, I fought it. For months, every time I imagined asking Hannah to dinner, guilt hit me. Would people think I'd replaced Laura? Would Emily hate me? Would my family believe I'd forgotten the woman I'd spent 20 years loving? Eventually, Hannah noticed something was bothering me. "You've been quiet lately. I don't know if I'm allowed to be happy again." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't need anyone's permission." I looked away. I feel like loving someone again means I'm betraying Laura. Hannah shook her head. "No." She spoke with absolute certainty. "It means Laura loved someone capable of loving deeply." Those words broke something open inside me. When I finally proposed, it wasn't dramatic. No crowd. No expensive restaurant. Just the two of us walking through the botanical gardens, where Laura and I had once taken Emily when she was little. "I don't expect an answer today," I said. Hannah looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I already have one." She smiled. "Yes." For the first time in years. The future didn't frighten me. But before we told anyone else, I knew I had to tell my family. I refused to let them hear it from someone else. I believed honesty deserved honesty in return. I couldn't have been more wrong. Dinner at my parents' house began quietly. Emily sat beside my mother. My older brother Michael poured himself another glass of iced tea. Dad asked about work. Mom asked whether I'd been sleeping better. For a few minutes, it felt almost normal. Then I cleared my throat. There's something I need to tell everyone. The room fell silent. I've been seeing someone. My mother smiled politely. Oh. I nodded. We're getting married. For 2 full seconds. Nobody spoke. Then my brother frowned. Who? I answered honestly. Hannah. My father's expression changed instantly. The nurse. She hasn't been my wife's nurse for almost 2 years. That doesn't matter. My mother's chair scraped against the floor. Oh, Daniel. Her voice carried disappointment instead of happiness. How could you marry her and you stop being our son? My father's words didn't feel like an emotional outburst. They sounded like a verdict. No one at the table argued with him. Not my mother. Not my brother. Not even Emily. I looked from one face to another, waiting for someone, anyone, to say he had gone too far. Instead, my mother folded her hands together. We've already lost Laura, she said quietly. We won't let you dishonor her memory too. I stared at her. Dishonor? You're marrying the woman who took care of your wife. Hannah cared for Laura, I replied. She didn't take her place. My brother leaned forward. People are already talking. No, Michael, you're talking. You really think the community is going to believe nothing inappropriate happened? I pushed my chair back. So that's what this is. Dad looked me straight in the eye. It doesn't matter whether it happened. It absolutely matters. No. His voice was calm. It matters what people will believe. I turned toward Emily. She hadn't said a word. Emily. She slowly lifted her eyes. You know that's not true. She looked at my grandparents before answering. I don't know what to believe. That sentence hurt more than anything my father had said. Sweetheart. She whispered, it feels wrong. Hannah never betrayed your mother. You expect me to call her mom someday. No. I'd never ask that. But you're replacing her. I'm trying to survive. Nobody responded. The silence said enough. Dad stood first. If you walk out of this house planning to marry that woman. He pointed toward the front door. Don't come back. I waited. Still hoping someone would stop him. My mother looked away. Michael stayed seated. Emily slowly stood beside her grandparents. She didn't look at me. She simply picked up her purse. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Emily. She walked toward the door. I need time. Then take time. But don't leave like this. She hesitated. For one brief second, I thought she might turn around. Instead, she followed my parents outside. The front door closed behind them. The sound echoed through the entire house. I was alone. 3 weeks later, Hannah and I were married. There were 12 guests. My best friend stood beside me. 2 neighbors Laura had loved attended because they believed happiness wasn't betrayal. My parents didn't answer the invitation. My brother mailed it back unopened. Emily never responded. Even so, Hannah smiled as she walked toward me. She wasn't trying to erase my past. She was choosing to become part of whatever future I still had. When the ceremony ended, she squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked at the empty row where my family should have been. I will be. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. I kept teaching at the local high school. Hannah returned to work, but something had changed in her. The final months of Laura's illness had stayed with her. She couldn't stop talking about the families she'd seen struggle with confusing medical systems, endless paperwork, and poor communication between hospitals and caregivers. One evening, she spread notebooks across the dining room table. "I keep thinking there has to be a better way." I smiled. "For what?" "For families." She pointed at pages filled with sketches. "There should be one place where caregivers, nurses, doctors, and relatives can actually communicate. You've been working on this for months." "What is it?" "I don't know yet." She laughed. "I just know people deserve better." I kissed the top of her head. "Then build it." She looked surprised. "You really think I can?" "I think you've been solving impossible problems since the day I met you." She smiled. That night was the beginning of everything. The next few years were anything but glamorous. Hannah worked long hospital shifts. Then she came home and spent nights building prototypes with 2 former colleagues. Weekends disappeared into investor meetings. Most people would have quit. She refused. I handled groceries, laundry, cooking, bills. Whenever she apologized for missing dinner, I reminded her of something she'd once told me. "You don't need anyone's permission." She'd laugh every time. "You remembered." I remember everything. 9 years passed faster than I expected. The silence from my family never broke. Every birthday I mailed Emily a card. Every Christmas I sent a gift. Every year the packages came back unopened. I stopped expecting replies. I never stopped sending them. Then one Tuesday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Hannah staring silently at the television. A financial news anchor was smiling. After today's historic public offering, CareBridge Health Technologies closed its first day of trading above expectations. Hannah blinked twice. "I think." She looked at me in disbelief. "I think we actually did it." Within hours, reporters were outside our office. Business magazines wanted interviews. Television stations called nonstop. Headlines estimated Hannah's net worth at $44 million. The woman my family had once called a disgrace had become one of the most respected entrepreneurs in healthcare. And suddenly, people who hadn't spoken to us in years remembered our phone numbers. Former neighbors sent congratulatory messages. Distant cousins commented on Hannah's interviews, calling her an inspiration. Even acquaintances who had quietly sided with my parents suddenly acted as though they'd always supported us. I thanked them politely, then ignored every invitation to reconnect. I had learned that silence has a remarkable way of disappearing when money arrives. Across town, Emily's phone began ringing. First my grandmother, then my father, then my brother. By the end of the week, they'd invited her over almost every evening. According to them, my marriage had cost the real family what should have been theirs. Dad slid a yellow legal pad across the kitchen table. "We've made a list." Emily frowned. "A list? What Daniel needs to do now?" My mother nodded. Hannah wouldn't have that company without him supporting her. So the family deserves recognition." Dad corrected her. "No." He tapped the paper. "We deserve our share." Emily looked down at the growing list. Company shares, a family trust, changes to my will, financial support, compensation. She looked uncertain. "I don't know." Dad leaned back confidently. If your father still has any decency left. He pushed the folder toward her. He'll understand. After Emily walked away from my front porch, I didn't chase her. I stood there holding the folder she'd left behind. The words family expectations stared back at me from the cover. Hannah quietly closed the front door. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she rested a hand on my arm. Daniel. I looked at her. I'm sorry. She frowned. For what? For dragging you into this. She shook her head immediately. No. Her voice was calm. They didn't come because of me. They came because of money. She glanced at the folder. They came because someone convinced Emily she was owed something. I nodded slowly. And that scares me more. I walked upstairs to the small spare bedroom. Most people would have called it a storage room. To me, it was where I kept everything I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Old photo albums. Laura's favorite blanket. Emily's elementary school artwork. Boxes labeled by year. In the back of the closet sat a gray metal lockbox covered in dust. I hadn't opened it in years. The key was still taped beneath the bottom drawer of my desk. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. Inside were 9 years of unanswered love. The first bundle contained birthday cards. Every one addressed to Emily. Age 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Each envelope carried my handwriting. Each one had been returned unopened. Across the front of nearly every envelope was the same stamp. Return to sender. I swallowed hard. Hannah sat beside me on the floor. She quietly picked up another stack. You kept everything. I couldn't throw them away. You always said. She smiled sadly. That maybe one day she'd want to know. I hoped she'd believe I never stopped trying. The next bundle was even harder to look at. Wedding invitations. One addressed to Emily. Another to my parents. Another to my brother. Everyone had come back unopened. There were Christmas cards. Graduation announcements from friends Emily had known. Photographs from vacations. Notes Hannah had written herself. One simply read, Emily, we'd love to see you whenever you're ready. No pressure, we miss you. The envelope had never been opened. Hannah lowered her eyes. I remember writing this. So do I. I kept wondering why she never answered. So did I. Then I reached the bottom of the box. There sat a thick envelope marked Certified Mail Records. I frowned. I forgot these were here. Inside were mailing receipts, tracking confirmations, delivery notices, address changes. As I spread everything across the floor, one detail immediately stood out. Several certified letters had never reached Emily's address. Instead, the forwarding instructions listed my parents' home. I read the paperwork twice, then a third time. Hannah. She leaned closer. What? I never changed these. She studied the forms. You didn't. Someone else had. Another envelope contained emails I'd printed years earlier. Back when Emily first stopped answering, I'd asked my father if she'd moved. His reply had been simple. She's staying with us. Send everything here. We'll make sure she gets it. I had trusted him. Every birthday card. Every Christmas gift. Every letter. I'd mailed them exactly where he'd instructed. None had ever reached her. For 9 years. I'd believed my daughter wanted nothing to do with me. And for 9 years, she had probably been told I'd stop trying. Hannah covered her mouth. Oh my God. I leaned back against the wall. It wasn't just silence. No, it was manufactured. She nodded slowly. They kept both of you apart. I stared at the mountain of unopened envelopes. All those birthdays. All those holidays. Every chance to reconnect. Stopped before Emily ever had the opportunity to decide for herself. Hannah reached into another box she'd brought from the closet. I think you should see these too. Inside were copies. Every card she'd written. Every invitation she'd mailed. Every holiday dinner she'd invited Emily to attend. She smiled faintly. I started making copies after the second year. Why? She looked at me. Because I was afraid someday she'd think neither of us cared. I couldn't speak. She had quietly protected the truth. While I was still hoping everything would somehow fix itself. The next morning I picked up the phone. Emily answered after 3 rings. What? I'll talk about your list. There was a pause. Good. But not until you meet me. Silence. Alone. Another pause. Finally. Where? The Riverside Cafe. When? Tomorrow. She hesitated long enough that I thought she'd refuse. Then she sighed. It's fine. She arrived exactly on time. No folder this time. No demands. Just guarded eyes. I had already claimed a booth near the back. The table beside me held a cardboard archive box. Emily looked at it. What's that? I slid it toward her. 9 years. She frowned. What do you mean? Open it. She slowly lifted the lid. The first thing she saw was a birthday card. Her name. My handwriting. The postmark from 9 years earlier. She stared at it without moving. I've never seen this. I know. She picked up another. Then another. Her breathing became uneven. There are. She counted silently. So many. I mailed one every year. She looked at me in confusion. I never got them. I know. She opened one envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple birthday message. Happy 17th birthday. I hope you're smiling today. I'll always love you. Dad. A tear landed on the paper. You wrote this. Every year. Her eyes filled as she looked through more letters. Christmas wishes. Graduation congratulations. Invitations to dinner. One note simply said, the front porch light will always be on for you. Emily wiped her face. I thought. Her voice broke. I thought you stopped caring. I never stopped. She stared at me across the table. Then who? Before I could answer, a familiar voice interrupted us. Emily. She froze. My father, my mother, and my brother were standing beside our table. My father's expression hardened the moment he saw the open letters. What is all this? Emily slowly stood. Her eyes moved from the letters to my parents and back again. Did you know about these? Nobody answered. Without saying a word, I reached into the archive box one final time. I removed the last sealed envelope. The certified records that proved exactly where every one of those letters had gone. I placed it in the center of the table. No one spoke. My father looked at the envelope for only a second before reaching for it. I placed my hand on top of it. No. He frowned. Daniel, this isn't the place. It became the place the moment you followed us here. My mother forced a nervous smile. Emily, sweetheart, don't let him confuse you. Emily didn't even look at her. She was staring at the certified mail receipt lying on top of the envelope. What is this? I slid it toward her. Open it. She hesitated. Then she pulled out the paperwork. The first page was a certified mailing receipt dated 9 years earlier. The second showed the delivery address. Not Emily's. My parents' house. She turned another page. Another receipt. Another redirected delivery. Then another. And another. Her hands began to shake. What? She looked up at my grandparents. What is this? Nobody answered. I quietly spoke. When you stopped answering my calls, your grandfather told me you'd moved in with them. Emily slowly nodded. I did. He told me to send everything there. Her breathing grew heavier. I trusted him. She looked down again. Every receipt told the same story. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, graduation letters, holiday invitations. Everything had been redirected. Everything had gone to the same address. My parents' house. Emily whispered. I never saw any of these. I know. She opened another envelope. Inside was our wedding invitation. Not a replacement copy. The original. Still sealed. Her eyes widened. You invited me. Of course I did. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. My mother finally spoke. You were too young to understand. Emily looked at her. What? We were protecting you. From what? My father answered instead. From a terrible mistake. I leaned forward. No. He glared at me. You convinced my daughter I'd abandoned her. You abandoned your family. I married the woman I loved. You married your late wife's nurse. I married a widow's friend who helped me survive after my wife died. There isn't a difference. There is. Emily looked at Hannah. She had remained quietly near the cafe entrance after arriving a few minutes earlier, only because I'd asked her to wait nearby in case I needed support. She hadn't interrupted. She hadn't defended herself. She simply walked over now and placed another stack of envelopes on the table. I kept copies. Emily blinked. You did. Hannah nodded. Every invitation. She opened one. Emily, we'd love to have you for Thanksgiving whenever you're ready. No pressure. We'll always save you a seat. Another. Happy 18th birthday. We hope someday we can celebrate together. Another. Your dad talks about you every single day. Emily looked at Hannah with tears streaming down her face. You wrote these? Yes. Why? Hannah smiled sadly. Because I never wanted you to think I was trying to replace your mother. Silence settled over the table. Finally, Emily whispered. I spent 9 years hatting you. I know. And you still kept inviting me. I hoped one day you'd read them. Emily slowly turned toward my parents. Her expression had completely changed. She wasn't angry yet. She was devastated. You told me he never called. Nobody answered. You told me he forgot my birthdays. Silence. You told me he chose Hannah over me. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Emily. She cut him off. No. She looked directly at my father. Did you keep these from me? He exhaled. We did what we believed was right. Her face fell. You lied. We protected your mother's memory. You destroyed my relationship with my father." My mother reached for her hand. Emily stepped back. "Don't." My mother froze. "You let me believe he stopped loving me. We wanted you to move on." Emily laughed through her tears. "You made sure neither of us ever had the chance." Several relatives who had been eating nearby had quietly recognized us after my parents arrived. They couldn't help overhearing the conversation. One of my cousins slowly walked over. "Uncle." He looked at my father. "Is this true?" No answer. Another relative picked up one of the returned birthday cards. The date on the envelope spoke for itself. The truth no longer needed defending. It was sitting on the table. My father finally straightened his shoulders. "This doesn't change the fact that Daniel owes this family." I couldn't help smiling. It wasn't out of satisfaction. It was disbelief. Still talking about money. You supported Hannah while she built that company. I supported my wife. The family deserves something. I shook my head. "No. You wouldn't have that life without us." "No." I looked him directly in the eye. "I have this life because the moment you abandoned me." I reached over and took Hannah's hand. She didn't." He opened his mouth again. I stopped him. "You told me that if I married Hannah, I was no longer your son." "I meant to." "No." I spoke calmly. "You don't get to rewrite that either." I slid the folder labeled Family Expectations back across the table. "You came asking for company shares." I pushed it closer. "You asked for changes to my will." Closer. "You demanded financial support." The folder stopped in front of him. "My answer is no." He stared at it. "Every request. Every single one." Emily looked at the folder. Then she picked it up. Without saying a word, she tore it cleanly in half. Then into quarters. Then smaller pieces. The scraps fell onto the cafe table. She looked at my grandparents. "I don't want any of it." My father stared at her in disbelief. "Emily, I came here because I believed you." She wiped her eyes. "I trusted you." My mother began crying. "We only wanted what was best." Emily shook her head. "No. You'll understand someday." "I understand now." She looked at me. "I'm the one who lost 9 years." I stood. For a second, neither of us moved. Then my daughter stepped forward. For the first time since she was 16. She hugged me. Neither of us spoke. There weren't words big enough for what we'd lost. The months that followed weren't perfect. They couldn't be. 9 years doesn't disappear because the truth finally comes out. Emily never moved in with us. She didn't suddenly become close to Hannah overnight. Instead, we started with small things. Coffee on Saturday mornings. Phone calls that lasted a little longer each week. Birthday dinners. Holiday meals. The first Thanksgiving Emily attended, Hannah quietly placed an extra serving dish on the table. Emily smiled. "You still save me a seat." Hannah smiled back. I never stopped. Over time, their conversations became easier. Not because the past disappeared. Because honesty finally replaced the lies that had kept them apart. As for my parents and my brother, they refused to apologize. Relatives who had believed their version of events for years slowly distanced themselves after learning what had really happened. The influence my parents once held over the family quietly disappeared. Not because I exposed them. Because their own actions finally caught up with them. One evening, months later, I opened the same gray lockbox. This time, I wasn't putting more unopened letters inside. Emily handed me every birthday card I'd written. "I think these belong with you." I smiled. "No." I handed them back. "They belong with you now." She nodded and held them close. Then Hannah reached over and took my hand. For the first time in a very long time, our family wasn't built on guilt. It wasn't built on money. It wasn't built on anyone else's approval. It was built on truth. They said marrying Hannah would cost me my family. In the end, it only cost me the people who never truly acted like one.